What's up, everybody? My name is Kodak Zach, and I'm back again with more of our draft league. In the last video, I talked about how each team came out of the draft, where their team stood, what I thought of all their teams, what I thought of their cores, and how I expected some of them to be used. Now, it's time to see that put to practical use. We're in week 1. We've finished all of our games. Our matchups are as follows. I myself played Kick for Life, No Shame in Losing, played WOT, the Beatdown Boomers played the Los Angeles Charge Bugs, and the Weasel Boys played Major League Gaming. All the games were exciting. There was a lot of fun compositions brought. There was a lot of interesting stuff to see. Some of them were very close games, some of them were not. And I'm going to now go through. We're going to break down all the action and see what happened. So I hope you'll join me on the ride. And let's see what we've got. Starting with myself. All right, starting off with game number 1 between myself, the Gemstone Gamers, and the incredibly well-named Kick for Life, owned by, you guessed it, Kick for Life. This game I felt was very important to me to have weather options in multiple directions. That's why I brought Seismitoad against his Rain in Kyogre. I also brought Cherrim as a sun option with Sableye as a sun setter to help me get out of the rain if need be. I have Whimsicott for Tailwind and Fake Tears, kind of a standard support mon. And then options for both Yveltal and Solgaleo to max. Solgaleo with a weakness policy and Yveltal with black glasses. But the hope was to be using either Cherrim or Seismitoad as my Maxmon. Unfortunately, neither of those went very well for me, so we had to resort to some different tactics. But I think my in-game adjustment ended up going really well. But in game 1, we started off, and I lead Seismitoad Yveltal into Kyogre Venusaur. Now, I think this is a solid lead for me. I think I'm in okay shape. My big concern at this point is not to get slept. So with Seismitoad, I have Max Airstream through Bounce, which is a roll to kill Venusaur. Now, I could have played smarter, and I think this is my first blunder, which causes me to get behind early in this game. But I could have, with +1 Yveltal would definitely outspeed that Venusaur, meaning that I could have gone for a Snarl or some similar spread move to pick up the Venusaur and hit the Kyogre in the same move. But instead, I tried to Sucker Punch the Venusaur in order to, ensure that nothing got set up on me. Unfortunately, he does not go for an attacking move in turn 1, and my roll does not KO, meaning that the Venusaur lives through turn 1, and I get thundered into Yveltal and paralyzed, which is an unfortunate turn, but it makes the Toxic not work from Venusaur. Pause. That being said, I'm still in an okay position. At the end of turn 1, their Venusaur is very low. My Yveltal may be paralyzed, but it's also at soon to be +2 speed if I use another Airstream, so it's not losing anything, and it's max speed timid Yveltal, so I think it would be manageable, right? This is where my second blunder, I think, comes in. I decide to double down into the Venusaur, expecting that my timid Yveltal, even at paralyzed and neutral speed, will outspeed the Kyogre. But unfortunately, as I learn, the Kyogre that he brought is Scarfed Kyogre, and it outspeeds my Yveltal and picks up the KO. So now we've both lost a Mon, myself losing one of my restricteds. So I'm in a little bit of a disadvantage, and I'm also down to one last turn of my Dynamax. I think my better play there would have been to go Overgrowth into the Kyogre and Snarl to try to pick up the Venusaur if need be, because Yveltal should have still been in an advantageous position there. If they protect, if they do whatever, I'm in okay shape, and I save a turn of my max for whatever else comes in. But instead, I'm stuck now with Sableye Seismitoad, as he then switches into Grimmsnarl. My Sableye set is almost entirely support-oriented. The only offensive move I believe I ran was Shadow Sneak, which was mostly to pick up late kills or proc my own weakness policy on Solgaleo. So I tried to ally switch, max overgrowth, picks up the Kyogre, but the Grimmsnarl gets a Spirit Break into Seismitoad, which isn't that big of a deal, but it does cause me to have a little bit of leftover damage. So at this point now I'm in a little bit of an advantage Pokemon-wise, but they still have Dynamax left, so I'm not out of the woods yet. And I do not have max for my Solgaleo, which it really likes, so I have to play carefully around, especially the Palkia, because I think the Grimmsnarl is not that bad of a scenario if I get down to that in Solgaleo. So my objective at this point is to take out the Palkia, see what I can't, get on the Grimmsnarl, but it's not really a priority, right? The Palkia protects the first turn, which is a really smart play from him. He gets a Spirit Break into my Sableye, which causes it to be in KO range, and I've burned my entire turn. He then maxes, I believe. No, he tries to protect. He tries to double protect. I don't understand the double protect play here. I think he's in an advantageous position. I think he wants to, by double protecting, I think he wants to get out of rain to slow my Seismitoad, but at the same time, at ×2 speed, I'm still faster than both of his mons on the field right now. So I didn't really understand the play, but it gets me a bit of free damage. The Power Whip does about half, and the Spirit Break comes into Sableye before I can do anything more with that. So now it's down to a 2v2. Solgaleo Grimmsnarl, or Solgaleo Seismitoad against Palkia Grimmsnarl, which, with him still having max, becomes a disadvantage in my position. Now, Palkia gets the Dynamax, and Grimmsnarl goes for Trick, which gives it Lagging Tail. Instead, and I lose my weakness policy. Sunsteel Strike does not pick up the Grimmsnarl and then activates a weakness policy on it, and the Max Quake kills my Solgaleo. So now I'm in a 2v1 against a Palkia with 2 turns left of Dynamax and a +2 Grimmsnarl. So I'm in a disadvantaged spot, but the advantage is I'm faster. So my escape route play at this point is I elect to Bounce. Bounce lets me dodge both the Wyrmwind and the Foul Play that come into my Seismitoad. They restore, but it burns an entire turn. Because this is a Salt Vest on my Seismitoad, I don't have the option of Protect or anything of the sort. So I go for the Bounce, I go into Grimmsnarl to try to pick it up, and then I can hopefully Power Whip the Palkia in the final turn and win. Unfortunately, anyone who's played Pokemon before knows that Bounce is not the most reliable move. It misses, and Seismitoad gets picked off by the double into it, and I lose game 1. I think Kick played really well in this game. There were a couple of weird decisions on both sides that cost, but this was, I think, the game that realized for me that I needed to adjust my strategy and kind of see what I could do differently to approach this, because the counter rain didn't work as well as I'd hoped for it, and the Venusaur kind of threw a wrench in that plan. I didn't expect to see it against this matchup, but it really hurt me in that first game. So after losing game 1, I have to adjust my strategy a little bit. I'm in a little bit of a disadvantaged position now. I have to win 2 games in a row to bring this back, and it starts here. I expected to see a similar lead to game 1. I expected to see rain plus some form of support, be it Venusaur, be it Grimmsnarl, something of the sort. So I led my counter Sun, leading with Sableye and Cherrim, but I read wrong, and he leads Venusaur and Volcarona, which is a very bad matchup for me because Cherrim cannot hit either of those effectively at all. This forces me to kind of go on my back foot and pivot because I feel that I need Cherrim late game against Kyogre and Palkia. Cherrim running Life Orb, it's my main max target on this team that I brought, so I feel the need to try to save it as best as I can. So I go for the switch into Yveltal and Ally Switch in order to try to protect the Yveltal, but I wasn't prepared for Volcarona to overheat, which costs me my Sableye and costs me my Weather Setter. Now I'm in a really back foot position because of how the rain will get set against me, and I don't have any way to keep it from getting up. I'm now at disadvantage, so I need to pivot and try to go as fast as I can and hit as hard as I can, as quickly as I can, in order to try to bring this back in some way. So I go straight into Solgaleo, I max my Yveltal, and I Airstream into the Venusaur slot, hoping to avoid Sun or Poison or anything of the sort. Because the Volcarona is at 0.5 special attack, I don't feel like I need to worry about it as much, even with Solgaleo on the field. So that's where I prioritize speed. Now, the Protect was a very good play there, and it keeps me from being able to pick up that Venusaur, which would otherwise have been a one-shot. But fortunately, I protect my Solgaleo as well, meaning that the only damage that turn is through my Airstream. After that, he switches out Volcarona to try to remove the debuffs on it. I go for an Airstream into that slot, pick up the take the Grimmsnarl to 25, and then Psychic Fangs with my now +2 speed Solgaleo into Venusaur to pick it up. I was hoping to pick the double kill here and get both restricteds in, but if you've noticed by this switch, one of the restricteds didn't come to this game. So now I'm in a position of, did Palkia not come, or do I have a weather advantage again? And thankfully, I'm able to dodge the Prankster trick because of Dark type. That's something that, again, Kick is a little bit of a newer player, so those are things that you have to kind of learn as you go. And I was fortunate to avoid that and keep myself safe in that part, which then leads to max Airstream picking up the Volcarona, and I'm able to get down to a singular Mon. So this game turned around heavily in part because of the lack of Kyogre, as Palkia comes in and is revealed as the last Mon, as well as a couple of, technical things that are just, you learn as you go. And you're playing with new players, so, you expect those kind of things, and those are teaching moments, those are learning moments, and that's something that we talked about after the match, was some of those kind of moments. But now I'm in an advantage. I may not have any more max, but I have 3 Pokemon left. Cherrim, who I don't really want to bring in if I don't have to, but I have the option for. Now Palkia maxes here turn 1, and I try to go for a read into a Protect to proc my own weakness policy, hoping that it will max Quake into my Solgaleo and give me a chance to get a bigger hit off. As I snarl into it, trying to whittle it down. But instead it geysers into the Solgaleo, instead sets its own rain up, which is, I think, a really smart play. Unfortunately, it wasn't enough because I'm able to just whittle down the special attack of this Palkia and slowly but surely make it a null point as it whittles itself down. The Wormwind does pick up Yveltal, but the recoil will kill Palkia, and I win game 2 2-0. So now we go into game 3, and I feel a little bit more confident on what his team looks like and what he's trying to pull off. So I adjust again going into game 3. So after trying to run 2 different kinds of counter weather in games 1 and 2, I felt like that wasn't winning me games. It wasn't as strong as I had hoped into this team. he brought really good counters to my counter weather, so I wasn't able to just run it as freely as I thought. But what was working was Yveltal, so I decided to go in and I led Sableye Yveltal to just make sure I could get as much early pressure on as possible. He leads an equally pressuring team in Kyogre and Volcarona, which is a terrifying combination because of I have to consider redirect. He still hasn't shown any form of redirect, but Volcarona has that option on the table. It also has, I know at this point, Scarf Kyogre because of the Game 1 paralysis speed situation. So I know for a fact that he's going to be faster than my Yveltal, even at neutral speed. So I have to play this very smart and very carefully, but it's a situation that I can end up running away with. So I max turn 1 with Yveltal and Sunny Day. My hope with Sunny Day was to remove any option of spread water moves, but instead they try to read the ally switch and go for Thunder, which connects in Sun, shockingly enough, into Sableye's slot, but they don't get the ally switch. They now lose Sun, and the Airstream will pick up the Volcarona, leaving us with a Kyogre in Sun. They send in Grimmsnarl, and now I'm in a very good position, right? I have a +1 speed Yveltal. I have Sableye on the field if I need it for Quash, but I'm not very scared of the Kyogre because of the Sun now. It needs to get itself out in order to get its own weather up. So I take the advantage, and I switch out my Sableye for Whimsicott to bring in extra support, and I Airstream into the Palkia slot, which takes it down, or Darkness into the Palkia slot to take it down into very low HP. Palkia attempts to protect, but the Airstream picks it up. I don't know if that crit made a difference, but it very well could have. And the Moonblast picks up Grimmsnarl. So now I'm in phenomenal position. I may be -1 special attack, but I have still 4 Pokemon left to his 1, and even though it's Kyogre and even though it's Scarf, it's we have the +2 speed advantage. Fake Tears is able to help us get some good damage off onto it. Goes for the Thunder, which we live because of the Snarl, so that was a very important Snarl. And another Fake Tears and Dark Pulse picks up the Kyogre, and we win that game 4-0. So I think from game 1, where I made a couple of big blunders, into game 2, where I very easily could have gotten 2-0'd and sent home packing, I was pretty happy with how I was able to adjust in game 2 and then bring those adjustments into game 3, and game 3 was pretty convincing of a win. So for my first match against Ash, against Kick for Life, we win 2-1 to finish the first week 1-0. Now let's take a look at one of the other games between No Shame in Losing and WOT. Our next match features 2 newer players. This was one that I was very personally interested in because while the matchup on paper was very difficult, I did help both of these players in their post-draft with how they could team build and what their best options were. So I felt like I had kind of an idea of where both players were going to lean when they played, which made it very interesting to me to see how it ended up turning out. I do think this was a very difficult matchup for Lysithea because of Zacian, which does ridiculous damage into almost all of her powerful mons. It destroys Regieleki, it destroys Cherrim, it destroys Zygarde, and it's something that Mimikyu can help with thanks to burns and thanks to other things, but also Behemoth Blade is a menace. So the matchup didn't look great on paper, but it was something that we felt, it could, if you can deal with the Zacian, I think the rest of the team you can manage. So that was the message to Lysithea was, if you can deal with the Zacian. Now, on the other hand, this was a lead that Kat and I had talked about a lot, to the point that I wanted to mess around with it myself. I actually have made a team outside of the draft league that focuses on this terrifying lead of Gothitelle and Zacian. Gothitelle traps in whatever is across from it, unless it is a ghost type. And Zacian is so strong, so powerful, and is able to just kind of run away with games that it puts on an immediate amount of pressure, and it makes it so they can't switch out if there's a bad lead. Which is exactly what happens turn 1. Regieleki tries to go for, I assume, a Volt Switch to get out and get positioning, but gets Behemoth Bladed and dies immediately. Then after the Tailwind, they do have Lysithea does get speed control, which is really important for her in this team. Getting that early speed control and getting that kind of momentum running is what she needed to be able to do this. But unfortunately, thanks to Helping Hand, even at +1 on the Zygarde's defense, it is not enough for it to survive a Play Rough from the Zacian, which takes it out in one shot and really leaves Lysithea in a bad spot. Now, she does still have Cherrim, she does still have Dynamax, but Cherrim in Dynamax still gets one shot by Behemoth Blade because of its doubling effect on Dynamax Pokemon. So it's not something that you want to worry about right away. With that being said, another move that gets revealed on Gothitelle is Ally Switch. Protects Zacian from this double that goes into and kills the Gothitelle instead, but the Behemoth Blade picks up the Cherrim and ends up cleaning up the two restricteds. Now it's down to just Suicune with a turn of Tailwind, and Kat elects to switch in and shift her Sun Core in, maxing the Charizard against the Dynamax Suicune. The Sun does not last long for Kat, as Suicune max geysers, but thankfully the Airstream comes in, helps Kat get back the speed control after the end of Tailwind, and does enough damage to put the Suicune in range, even though the geyser does pick it up. It puts the Suicune in range for the Groudon and the Zacian to be able to finish, as the Suicune has no way to double into both, and Kat picks up game 1 in what was a boat race in a lot of ways. It was very offensive. Both teams had modes to go slow-paced, but unfortunately Kat was able to force the tempo with the Gothitelle Zacian lead, and Lysithea was just never able to get off the back foot, which cost the game. So obviously, after being forced on your back foot the entire time, Lysithea had to make the adjustments. Kat, on the other hand, decided to not make any adjustments, run with the same strategy, worked very well in game 1, and was going to be equally as threatening in game 2. So the Lysithea makes the change to go Cherrim instead of Regieleki in the lead. Still elects for Suicune in order to get the Tailwinds up, to get the speed control, etc. And Kat elects to not fake out, goes to Helping Hand the Zacian instead, who goes into the protected Cherrim and burns the turn, and Suicune gets off a Tailwind. So now, for the first time in the set, Lysithea actually has the momentum. She has the speed control, she has no damage on either of her mons, and she can elect to either max the Cherrim and go after the Zacian, or try to, save that max for later, which she elects to save the max for later, and goes for the double protect, which does not go through, and Cherrim does go down, but she gets Rain Up to help the Suicune. Now, this is a huge turn from both sides, because Zygarde protects in order to try to keep itself safe, while on the other end, Gothitelle ally switches in order to try to keep the Zacian safe. And the ally switch pays off as the Scald goes into Gothitelle and burns it, keeping Zacian safe from the burn. But now Cat elects to swap in the Sun to try to keep the Zacian as safe as possible while the Zygarde sets up. The Play Rough does not pick up the Zygarde this time because the Helping Hand wasn't available. So both players then max their restricteds, Groudon and Zygarde. Zygarde has the Power Construct activate and the Coil boosts. So it's a scary thing to see, but it's also running into a Groudon and Sun, which is a scary thing to see. And what's good about Cat's set in this game is the Groudon is running Dragon Claw, which gives it max Wormwind, which allows it to whittle back down the attack of the Zygarde. So unfortunately not enough to save her Zacian, but she's got Sun up with the Zard and the Groudon in. Suicune is able to unfortunately change the weather, but now she's stuck with Zygarde with weakened attack, and this is a blunder play that I think is actually partially my own fault. In discussing the team and discussing the setups, I talked to Lysithea about having 1,000 Arrows, which is Zygarde's signature move, able to hit flying types, even though it is a ground type itself, and knock them out of the air. Unfortunately, what happens here is I think she got confused about that when maxed and tried to max Quake into the Charizard, which did not work, and was unable to pick up any damage or get any kind of buffs, which ends up costing her big in the end game here, as the Zygarde does actually take the max Wormwind from Groudon at 1 HP, but the Mimikyu is lost to the skies, and both of them are weakened in attack, which means that without the max, 2 spread moves are concerning, to say the least. The Heat Wave plus Precipice Blades is enough to pick up the Mimikyu, and it's just the Zygarde with 1 HP. The Charizard is able to Hurricane because of the rain, and win the game. So Cat picks that game up 2-0 over Lysithea with what was a really, really difficult matchup, but I think also played really, really well, so I was very impressed. The next game we're going to be looking at is probably the game of the week, the most exciting game between the Beatdown Boomers and the Los Angeles Chargebugs. This next match is one of the most exciting ones that I was looking forward to this week. It's between the Beatdown Boomers and the Los Angeles Chargebugs, 2 of the more experienced teams in the league, as well as 2 of the more interesting teams in the league. Snooze opting for an old school kind of classic style to his team, while Wyatt has a more gimmicky, multifaceted team with a lot of different options to run based on what his opponent has. I think both of these teams are very scary. Both of them were ones that I ranked A ranks in my initial rankings of all of the teams. So this was something that I was very interested to see as a early on matchup. One of the interesting things of note is neither team brought both of their restricteds. Snooze opting to leave his Giratina behind, while Wyatt did not want to bring Xerneas. So both of these teams are running a 1 restricted format, which is a really interesting change compared to the other games that we've watched so far. Now Snooze opts to lead in his Braviary Rotom into Amoonguss and Malamar. Now this is a really interesting combination because neither of Wyatt's side has Trick Room setters, I believe. I don't know if Malamar does actually, but it's a redirect offensive kind of lead, but unfortunately into this, Amoonguss has a very scary matchup into both of the Pokemon across from it, and it plays out exactly how you'd fear it would for Amoonguss. The Brave Bird picks it up, and the Will-O-Wisp goes into the Malamar and burns it, which immediately really hampers what it's able to do. This Rotom is going to put in a lot of work on the Will-O-Wisps throughout the entirety of this set. It does really well, I think, into a lot of what Wyatt wants to run, and it's kind of a scary option as well. Wyatt goes into the Pheromosa then, in order to try to get some speed control on his side, uses Icy Wind. But Snooze, in the dying breath of Braviary, gets the Tailwind off as Rotom gets another burn into Pheromosa. And one of the interesting pieces of tech that Wyatt brought gets revealed to be Baton Pass Malamar. After setting up a superpower from Malamar, he Baton Passes into the Calyrex to get it immediate buffs. And now he has a Calyrex in position next to Pheromosa with an option of speed control to be a sweeper. And that's exactly what he attempts to do. He maxes the Calyrex, speed swaps, and hailstorms into the Braviary. Now he gets away with it here as the Will-O-Wisp burn on Rotom misses, which puts him in the driver's seat. He's got a defense raise and he's got a 2x attack raise, but in comes Snooze's restricted, the Dialga. What I think is really interesting about this play is I don't know if it was intentional per se, but it was it ends up being a somewhat hard read as Wyatt hailstorms into the Rotom slot, missing the ally switch and dealing massive damage into the Dialga, and also revealing another piece of interesting information that Wyatt had, where the Steel Spike goes into the Calyrex, but the Calyrex, not holding a weakness policy or some form of, offensive item, but instead holding a Babiri Berry, specifically spec'd against this Dialga to make sure that it doesn't take too much from a Steel Spike and is able to win that 1v1. I think that's a really smart play. The coaching comes in, and now this Calyrex is starting to get on a roll, which is something you don't want to have happen. The Hailstorm does pick up the Dialga. We get another Chilling Neigh, and the Overheat from the Rotom goes into the Calyrex, which is a big deal to get some damage. I think a burn at this point probably wouldn't have done enough to save Snooze in this game, so I think the Overheat's a really smart play in that position. The problem is he's now stuck with a half special attack Rotom against a very strong, very fast Calyrex. Fortunately, his last mon is Hitmontop, which gets an Intimidate. Doesn't end up mattering very much, but gets the Fake Out into the Overheat, which is able to pick up the Calyrex, leaving Wyatt with just 2 mons left, the Pheromosa and the Malamar, both of which are burned. So all of a sudden, despite the speeds being in Wyatt's favor, the offense almost leans into Snooze's favor, but it becomes more of a slow play. And at this point, I'm just going to let this play out because these last bunch of turns, as I said, are a slow play. But Wyatt attempting to maintain speed control with Icy Winds and as much damage as possible thanks to the burn. Trying to buff up his Malamar as much as it possibly can through this burn to try to make it do some form of damage. But in the end, if we speed it up a little bit, in the end it's not enough. The Pheromosa goes down to another Rotom Overheat. The Malamar, even with the buffs it's getting from these superpowers, isn't able to do enough damage through the burn to outlast both of these Pokemon on Snooze's side, and Snooze is going to take the first game with what was a very close match. Both players played really well, I think, in this one, and this is one that's it's coming down to the wire in this one, and it will come down to the wire in a lot of these games, which is really neat. So Snooze picks up game 1 off of the early Calyrex kill thanks to the Overheat, which was a risk, but it paid off. So after a really close game 1, game 2 starts and both players decided they wanted to switch up their strategies. Snooze ends up leading the Hitmontop Dialga to give himself Intimidate, to give himself Fake Out, and to give himself weakness policy options with his Dialga, while Wyatt opts to go with a more speed-oriented lead, bringing Talonflame in place of his Amoonguss to try to get Tailwind and other options available. Because of this, the Intimidate actually raises Malamar's attack, which makes it an immediate threat. So the Fake Out goes into the Malamar. They don't keep Tailwind from going up, but the Wormwind does go up and kills the Malamar in one hit, leaving the Talonflame with halved attack and making it significantly less of a threat. Meanwhile, though, Wyatt is able to switch in his Calyrex free of harm into a 3 turns of Tailwind and give himself a setup option to try to counter this max Dialga. And that's exactly what he does. He brings it in and he maxes right away, going for the Hailstorm to try to set up his own weather and get some residual damage going, while Snooze goes for the Mach Punch into his Dialga to set up the weakness policy and deal massive damage into the Calyrex. Even through the Babiri Berry, it does over 50%, meaning that Wyatt has to be careful about it because he cannot take another one no matter what he's pulling off. The next turn, both players actually decided to take it defensive, as both the Calyrex and the Dialga max guard. Talonflame Brave Bird is not enough to kill the Hitmontop, and the Hitmontop close combat goes into the max guard of Calyrex. So it ends up being a slow play turn that I think ends up actually benefiting Wyatt in the long run because of the max turn advantage that he has over the Dialga. He still has one more turn of max than the Dialga as it returns here. So he's able to, even through the Mach Punch and the Brave Bird, he's able to pick up the Dialga with his max Hailstorm and get his Chilling Neigh boost before he drops back to his regular form. Now Snooze on the back foot has to go into Snorlax Comfey, which is his final option. He does have the advantage of the Tailwind not being up and Talonflame not being priority, but Talonflame is the fastest thing on the field, so it gets the Tailwind up anyways, and the Glacial Lance comes through, dealing massive damage to both, bringing Comfey down to Sash and keeping Snorlax from being able to Belly Drum, which would completely just neutralize Snooze's game plan. The Hail does kill the Comfey, and then between the Brave Bird and the Glacial Lance on Snorlax, it's enough to pick it up and give Wyatt a win in Game 2. So now we go into Game 3. Both players at 1 apiece, and I think the big issue with this game for Snooze that worked for him so well in the first game is the lack of burns. By not bringing Rotom, he didn't have great options to slow down, especially Calyrex, which ended up costing him as it tore through a large portion of Snooze's team. So in Game 3, another adjustment needs to be made. In a critical Game 3, both players decide to go with what worked best for them in their respective win games. Snooze going back to his Game 1 roots of Rotom and Braviary, while Wyatt goes for Talonflame and Malamar from Game 2. This gives both of them options for speed control, gives Snooze back the option of burns, and gives Malamar a chance to shine again as a superpower threat, getting buffs up and having the Baton Pass option ready in the event that it needs Calyrex. So both players do go for their Tailwinds. Malamar goes for its superpower, and Rotom decides to Volt Switch out off of the Talonflame, trying to get Dialga in Tailwind. However, with both Tailwinds being set up, Dialga doesn't have the speed advantage that it needs to outduel the Malamar, so he opts to immediately switch it back out into Rotom Heat in order to try to protect his Dialga for the late game. The Brave Bird goes into Malamar and does a decent chunk of damage, but the Malamar tries to Topsy-Turvy, which is its last piece of tech that Wyatt tried to hold on for the very last game, trying to flip any weakness policy boosts that the Dialga would get into negatives, making it essentially worthless on the field anytime that it tries to max. I think this is a really, really smart setup by Wyatt to have. Unfortunately, it didn't work out. We didn't get to see it in practical use, but I really appreciate the idea of the Topsy-Turvy on Malamar to make sure to stop any Dialga weakness policy shenanigans. And I also really think it's a really smart play to save that for Game 3 to make it feel like that's a safe setup until the point that it matters the most. So I think that's a really good play. Even though it didn't work out, I really appreciate the thought that went into it nonetheless. So Braviary then protects but Rotom takes the brunt of this Brave Bird before burning the Malamar, who then baton passes out into Calyrex. This is now where things get a little bit scary for Snooze, because the speeds are not in his favor at this point, and even with Rotom having strong options into Calyrex, you don't want to leave Calyrex on that island because it can run away with the game, right? So Snooze opts to stay in for the Dynamax, takes the Brave Bird from the Calyrex, which kills the Talonflame, and he goes for the Overheat instead of the Burn, trying to, similar to Game 1, gain the damage advantage over the burn advantage. In this case, it leaves his Rotom very much weakened, with Calyrex now at +2 attack, which brings in the Pheromosa and the Dialga, which gives Wyatt the option of speed control at this point. So now Snooze is having to play on the back foot a little bit, figure out how he can beat this Calyrex, knowing that it has both a Babiri Berry and it has likely speed control given speed swap from Pheromosa. Dialga opts to protect as the speed swap goes in, and the Hailstorm reads the protect and takes out the Rotom, keeping Calyrex safe from the burn, which is going to be what's key to the end game of this last match. Dialga opts to go Hitmontop in the back and tries to set its weakness policy, but Wyatt, saving his aces up his sleeve until the very last second, shows that he does in fact have Quake on his Calyrex, hasn't shown it the entire time, which is able to one-shot the Dialga, even through the Dynamax, and pick up the final game for Wyatt, as he wins it 2-1 over Snooze in what was a really, really exciting display of team building from both sides. I was really, really impressed with both of these team builds. I think they both had really good options in place, and I wouldn't have been shocked to see this game go either way, as these were two really, really strong teams and really strong options that I worry myself looking forward in the schedule, you know, how I'm going to team build for them when the time comes. Now we're going to move on to our final match of the week. This one is between the Buizel Boys and Major League Gaming. The last match of the week comes from the Buizel Boys of Madbro and the Major League Gaming from Kurairai. This features probably the most disadvantageous matchup spread, as Madbro has a great deal of knowledge in Pokemon, has played extensively, and Rai is more of a beginner, is still kind of learning the ropes and is trying to understand things as he goes. But I still think this game has a lot of good things to see, both from an analytical perspective of some cool things that the teams had, as well as things to learn from going forward, and how to improve upon what happened in this game. So Madbro comes in with a really interesting lead of Lunala and Urshifu, which gives him really good options against the scarier Pokemon on Rairai's team, like Calyrex, as he can, as we see in turn 1 here, he can Wide Guard to protect himself from any kind of Astral Barrage, as well as Sucker Punch to make sure that even if it's, you know, Sash, he's protected. This is a really good, what could be called like game-winning type of play, where it's a cover all options kind of play. You very easily could have, you know, mixed up and done something different, tried to like hit the Gallade and kill both, but if it was Sash Calyrex, obviously you might lose your Lunala there. So having the option to cover everything you possibly can is really, really smart here from Madbro, and I think it turns out really well. It also ends up covering for the Dazzling Gleam that the Gallade goes for to keep his Urshifu safe. So now Rai on his back foot, missing his restricted. His Ho-Oh did not come, so he only had his Calyrex to be his restricted, which puts him a little bit behind the sticks and makes him have to play a little bit of catch up here, where Madbro can play very smart and defensively and slow and keep himself in position. he opts to go for Moongeist Beam, which one-shots the Metagross, and Intimidate into the Gallade to neuter its attack and make sure that it doesn't cause any big issues. The shield also protects Lunala. For those who are newer to VGC, didn't play when Lunala was very popular back in Gen 7. It has an ability of Shadow Shield, which neutralizes incoming damage on the first hit that it takes. If it's at 100% HP, it will take less damage from incoming attacks. So you have to break that shield, which is really difficult if you can't get like an early hit on it, which leads to that Earthquake doing almost no damage into the Lunala. The Wide Guard actually is a really smart play here as well to protect himself from the Landorus's Earthquake, which is able to then pick up the Luxray, and it leads to just the Gallade in a uphill battle that the Moongeist Beam ends, and Madbro wins game 1 with a 4-0. I think this game is a great example of how you can get yourself behind and try to like force things. I think what happened with Rai is he lost one of his best Pokemon turn 1 and wasn't able to, you know, do a trade or any kind of like real putback. And so for the rest of the game, he was trying to constantly play catch up, and he just never could because Madbro played patient and he stayed behind and he didn't let, you know, himself get arrogant with the big lead that he had. So I think that's something that's really, really smart and something that's good to learn from. Is both scenarios, you want to make sure you're keeping the level head. Yes, you lost a really important Pokemon, and yes, it becomes a really hard comeback at that point, but you still have options, right? Whereas Madbro, yes, you took his really important Pokemon, but the game's far from over yet. He still has 3 left. Don't get ahead of yourself. Don't, you know, still play the smart play, the slow play, and what your team is really built for is the slow play. So taking advantage of that really brings home and alleviates any doubt of something going wrong. And, you know, you get crit, you get whatever, and, you know, suddenly you might lose a game that you should have won, right? So that's really smart and really good level-headed play there to make sure that game is a win no matter what goes wrong with it. Game 2 gives a chance for Madbro then to show off another aspect of his team. As I said earlier, it's kind of built to play a little bit slower. It's a setup kind of team where you want to kind of get a defensive position and slow play out, be able to, you know, you still do a good bit of damage between like Lapras and Mewtwo and Urshifu, etc. But you have really good defensive options that make it hard for you to be removed. And that's where this second game really shines. This time he goes for Lapras and Lunala again, while Rai opts to go for the Metagross and Gastrodon combo. What happens here is the Resonance is going to get set up by the Lapras on the turn 1 max, while the Meteor Beam gives a really interesting piece of tech to Lunala, giving it a special attack buff right off the bat. It doesn't do a ton of damage into the Gastrodon, but it helps chip away at it, which, you know, Gastrodon is really good against the water types like Lapras because of Storm Drain. It's able to protect its allies, especially in Dynamax. So they want to whittle that down and they want to get rid of it. So a little bit of extra chip helps, as well as getting the special attack buff makes Lunala really, really scary on the field. The Grass Knot fails because of the Dynamax, and that's another thing where it's a learning moment. It's something that you know, as a newer player might not know, might not be as familiar with, where Grass Knot doesn't work on Dynamax Pokemon. So trying to have that little bit of extra like tech on your Metagross to take out something like Lapras on the opposing team doesn't end up working out because of, you know, it's just one of those small little detail things that's sometimes hard to know when you're starting out. So that's just another one of those learning experiences similar to in the first game with me and Kick, where you have to just kind of learn those things sometimes the hard way. And the Gastrodon goes for a Blizzard, which misses on Lunala, which is unfortunate because of it doesn't get the chance to break the shield and does barely any damage through the Aura Veil to the Lapras. Now, Rai tries to protect his Metagross, switch it out, and go into his Calyrex, tries to pivot, but unfortunately, the Lunala targets down that slot with a Moongeist Beam and picks up the Calyrex immediately. Another Resonance goes into the Gastrodon to get it lower. Incin comes out and is the Maxmon for Riot in this game. A really interesting option here. With it next to Gastrodon, it's actually protected from the Lapras, and he's running, I'm not sure what electric type move Incineroar gets, I'm going to be honest with you, but Max Lightning on the Incin to counter the Lapras is a really clever play and something that I really appreciated out of this game. It's not going to end up paying off in the long term as the Gastrodon goes down to the Max Rockfall and sets up Sand, but with Metagross coming back in, the Moongeist Beam is able to pick it up. The Max Lightning is enough to kill the Lapras through even Aura Veil. So it's got to be... Does it get like Wild Charge? Thunderfang? I'm not sure. Not sure what electric type move this is running on it, but that's a fun little tech thing if you need to max your Incineroar. But Urshifu comes back in, and the close combat doesn't quite do it, but it does put it in range for the Moongeist Beam to pick it up. And Madbro is able to pull out this game and win 2-0 over Kurairet. That's the end of these games. I think there was a lot of interesting stuff. I think there was a lot of stuff to learn from. A lot of stuff that I'm really interested to see more of. I'd love to see some of these concepts come back again in future games. I think there's some really cool team building ideas and some really good stuff that people have figured out with their cores. Even some stuff that I didn't see when I first looked at it. And that's always something that I really like to see, is when people can surprise me on, you know, I didn't see this setup, this core, this idea until you were able to put it in practice. So I'm really interested to see where people go with that and where some of these teams continue to improve. If you want to continue to see more of this, if you want to see more of these teams, more of this gameplay, or more of this breakdown, go ahead and drop the sub, like, comment, you know, all the YouTube stuff. I'm a streamer. I don't know. I don't do this stuff very often. Speaking of streaming, I do stream on Twitch. I'm live usually 3 to 4 nights a week at around 9 to 10 Eastern. Play a variety of games, a little bit of Pokemon, a little bit of some other stuff. So if that's more up your alley, feel free to come say hello over there. And if not, I will see you next week for the recap on week 2. Appreciate everybody hanging out, and have yourselves a damn good one. Bye-bye.